Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your Pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Garzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Doing all right. Can't really complain. I'm very busy due to work, but we're here. We have to record this week, as every week, but this week we definitely have to. We've got some really cool stuff to talk about in the world of Pauper. But let's first take care of all the upkeep stuff so we can get that out of the way. We can move on with our lives. First off, as always, we are brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a great online store with a variety of dice bags, playmats, tokens, and art prints from throughout the world of Magic and art history as a whole. And as we're partnered with them, you can either go to originalmagicart.store/commentary, spells that is in the name of the podcast, or you can use the code commentary in all caps, again, spells that is in the name of the podcast, during checkout, and you'll get a little bit of a kickback, and it lets them know that we sent you. So you're going to get 10% off your order for using either one of those. We're going to get a little bit of, support back from them. So everyone here is winning. You're getting cool stuff for your play space a little bit cheaper, and you're helping support the show. So really, really not a loss if you're already thinking about ordering from them. Once again, that is originalmagicart.store/commentary, or use the code commentary in all caps, both spelled as the way they are in the name of this podcast. We get you 10% off your order. Adrian, what do you have?
We're also on Patreon for just $1 an episode. You too can hear the full show, including the pre and post show, and get access to our patron exclusive Discord channel.
Cool. And lastly, we are brought to you in part by Hipsters of the Coast. Our podcast goes up there every week. It's a really great stop for all sorts of Magic content. They have content ranging from Legacy to Limited to Commander, anything you could want. They probably have some articles on it. Things go up daily. Go check them out. And, if you really enjoy the rest of their stuff, let them know on social media. They definitely would appreciate that. And if you tell them that we're the reason you're there, even better. All right. So we've actually kept one of the people on this call silent so far. We're joined again by Kendra, the Maverick Gal. Hey, Kendra.
How's it going?
It's going all right. Yeah. So today we got hit by a bit of a bombshell in terms of news for Pauper on Magic Online. And where do we want to start with this one?
I think you should say what the announcement is first, Mike.
Well, so that's the thing. There's a lot of parts to this announcement. So the overarching scope of this is that they're changing the way that the Magic Online championships are working. And this basically has been to include a bunch of other formats as potential paths to glory, if you will.
Right. So what they're doing is they're focusing a lot more on formats. So the idea is that you can play your favorite format and qualify for the Pro Tour that way. So replacing the, I think every 3 months, one of the format challenges will be, and I can't remember the word they used.
I think a championship?
Format championship? Is that what it's called?
Wait a second. So they have format playoffs, then format championships, which I think is once a year.
Well, the point is you can earn these points called format points, which you can use to enter in the format you've been grinding them in, which will let you place into the mocks, which will let you win, hopefully, and go to the Pro Tour.
So as I understand it, you are still also getting qualifier points in addition to format points, unless I'm reading things wrong. But I want to just say the biggest takeaway from this, hands down, has got to be the fact that they're now introducing competitive leagues for the Pauper format on Magic Online. And, previously, the only way that you could obtain qualifier points of any kind was through the weekly Pauper challenges on Sundays. And even then, the amount that you would get was very limited. I think you had to win. You basically would have to win, not even top 8, but actually win a full 6 of them to even just barely get enough qualifier points to be able to play in a monthly Mox playoff event.
Which is pretty unrealistic.
Yeah.
Like,
you used to be able to get qualifier points from doing leagues at one point, but that was before they introduced the treasure chest concept. Once they introduced treasure chest, they took away qualifier points from all of the friendly leagues, which in a way does make sense, but it made it pretty much impossible for anyone, playing Pauper specifically to qualify for another, for like a pro tour or something like that without playing another format like modern, standard, or even limited.
Yeah. And with this, we also get the change to the prize structure as well. So competitives are more heavily weighted to good records. And if the basic gist is at 3-2, you break even, anything below that in terms of record, you get nothing back. Like it's much more heavily weighted towards people who can 4-1, 5-0, that sort of thing.
And that will, of course, drive competition up. We've said for a long time, one of the things that we think is holding the format back is the fact that it's really only played at a casual level. This does a little bit to legitimize the more competitive side of Pauper. And I think it's going to be kind of the dawn of a new era as far as the format's concerned. People wanted, other format spikes or even pros to enter the format. And I think people are going to get what they wished for, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I mean, I think it's a good thing in the great scheme of things. I think more eyes on the format is always going to be pretty good.
I agree. I do want to, and I don't like to do this often. I do want to harken back to what Kendra said in the pre-show, though. Not everyone wants to play on the Pro Tour. So one of the other things that's sort of buried in the text there is that they may not keep the friendly leagues if there's not enough interest or worried about splitting the player base. They have said if that is the case, they will get rid of the friendly leagues and just leave the competitive leagues. Which I would like to have them keep both, because I definitely think both types of players like to play the format.
Yeah, I think there's definitely both sides to that, and I'll be completely frank with you. Well, I think it's definitely for the best in a way that we do really push the competitive leagues for a lot of reasons, and I think even let's take a look at the example of they do get rid of the friendly leagues at some point here. I think that we'll see a massive influx of other players. Obviously this isn't necessarily an accurate representation of, the format or anything, but I think we're going to see a lot of people come in, want to be pros, spikes, semi-pros, what have you, even legitimate pros coming in and playing this format, either because they maybe liked the format before, but were turned off by the fact that they couldn't grind to the Pro Tour, or else that that they can they feel like they can maybe now grind to the Pro Tour with something that's affordable, where modern can still cost hundreds of dollars, hundreds of tickets to get to. So we'll see like a bit more of an influx in player base because of that, but I think it will definitely hurt things. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a little surprised that they're going so deeply on the competitive aspect as opposed to the friendly aspect, which is basically where Pauper's had its roots for the longest time.
I think that the clearest thing we can compare it to is the legacy leagues, because they're structured the same way. There's a competitive but no friendly. Before we get too much further in the conversation, you did say something that I wanted to touch on, which is cost of the format. Do you anticipate, Kendra, that the price of staples, at least on Moto, will go up with a new influx of players?
I'm pretty sure we're actually already starting to see that just a little bit. So I definitely saw a link to the some of the price changes, and some of them have jumped. They haven't jumped much. But as we saw in our one Discord server we're a part of, Mikey Ruru made a comment and pointed out that even though while Pauper staples may not have jumped just yet, vintage staples have climbed like through the roof in a lot of respects because of these kind of announcements.
Like Power
and yeah, power spiked up. And for folks who don't play a lot of the Magic Finance game, Power is not dreadfully expensive online in comparison to real life.
Up until like probably like a couple days ago, You could really reasonably get a full set of power with the newer vintage Masters art for what, like $100, basically.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I just looked at Mox Sapphire, which is one of the most popular Moxes. It looks like it's already spiked like $4. It's pretty sizable.
Right, and that's only on day one
Yeah.
too. I mean, I would imagine that a lot of these are going to continue to grow.
I was gonna say, I imagine like we're gonna see like a pretty sharp incline of stuff like the usual suspects, right? Like I can imagine Palace Sentinels is gonna keep going up. Ash Barons is probably gonna experience a bit of a rise again.
The biggest offender is going to be Days, especially because there's also the rise with that in Vintage. Obviously, Legacy is probably going to see its own bump in a certain respect. So it just kind of Days just kind of hits that triple whammy of Pauper, Legacy, and Vintage.
Yeah, and I think it's something that we do want to keep our eye on in the future. Like, obviously, with players who have been playing this format for a while, you likely have a lot of these staples. But if you're someone who's a little bit newer to the format on Magic Online, I would definitely suggest that maybe if you're thinking about these things, maybe commit to them if you've got that level of economic latitude, just because these aren't getting cheaper. Like, Days is a really hard card to reprint, and also I can imagine that the blasts are going to go up.
Yeah.
Although didn't those just get a promo version
online? They did, actually, I believe. So so it's hard to say, but they could also still be, they were already available in chests, I believe, to a certain degree. So I don't know how much it's going to really affect things. I guess it just depends. I do foresee like a little bit of an uptick in paper too, because I know, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit deeper, but the obviously there's speculation that they're really trying to push the format a little bit. Obviously, they're trying to test the waters a little bit. There's been already speculation of if this does see a lot of, provide a lot of data to Wizards, then it might lead to some bannings for better or worse. And so it could be them trying to kind of shake up the format, shake it out a little bit. They want to, they might want to get a better feel for like what staples they want or whatever. Like let's say that they feel Chainer's Edict, Battle Screech, whatever, what have you, Arrogant Worm are worth reprinting at like a lower than, at a common rarity. They might even reprint that at like something like Ultimate Masters. I don't necessarily see it there. I could see reprints, but not like at the common level per se. But I could see, commons in other sets or something like that. And they may be trying to kind of like get it to a point where they can, in fact, sanction the format in paper. So that could drive paper prices up too, even just the speculation of that, baseless or otherwise.
Yeah, we're at like a weird turning point where like this news is literally what, like 7 hours old date at time of recording.
It's
like we're going in very raw. And like I'm excited personally, but I wonder how much of that is the fact that like I own a majority of this format. Like I just have boxes full of Pauper staples. So like the price aspect of it doesn't affect me as much.
I definitely feel that for sure. And I think that we're definitely going to see a bit of a shift in certain respects in how people play this format. For example, I think a lot of decks that you see that are played heavily in the leagues currently. Let's say, for example, Burn. Burn is a very popular deck. It's a solid deck. I wouldn't say that it's the best deck in the format or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a solid tier 2 deck that sometimes pushes up into tier 1. But it's very popular because it is so cheap. So there's a reason why you just run into so much of it in these leagues, because it's so affordable. But I think a lot of players are able to play it so well in those leagues because you can have a bad run in a friendly league and rebound in another league after that. It's a lot harder to do that in competitive leagues, though, and I think you're going to see people start, maybe not at first. At first, everybody's just going to throw whatever at the wall, but after they lose a couple times and realize they're not getting anything out of it. I think we're going to see a lot of those kind of like more affordable decks, like you're saying, just kind of start to phase out a little bit. Obviously, they're always going to show up. I can't wait till I see someone with one land spy in a competitive league, but it's going to happen. But it's going to be farther and fewer between.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the price point a while. Sort of what you've alluded to here. Pauper is known for being affordable. I think no matter what happens, the format's. I mean, you'd have to. It would be an extreme example for me. I don't know what kind of scenario would lead to this format being as expensive as even standard is what I'm trying to say here. So, but it is all perspective. A lot of people do like to play Pauper because it's so cheap, because the decks are affordable. Some people think it's a brewer's paradise. Other people play it because they like to be competitive. So it is going to be really interesting to see how things move forward. But I would say that I don't think it's doom and gloom on the prices. Like, I don't like, none of the cards in Pauper are reserve list for one. So I don't think that, if you want to get in the format, now is definitely the time. But I don't think that the idea of a price increase should necessarily scare you, which I know it has done to some Pauper folks in the past.
So I think something else I want to bring up is when we had Gavin on the show, he talked about the fact that they're trying a bunch of stuff right now. Like, this is a period of experimentation for Wizards, and I think this is an extension of that. I think that they're trying to figure out what role they're going to play moving forward in the esports arena. As much as I don't like Magic being referred to as an esport, like, that's how Wizards has chosen to conceptualize streaming stuff on Twitch. So I'm wondering if this is a little bit of Wizards trying to say, like, we've had standard for years, we've had modern, we've had these staple formats that we love broadcasting. Like, this could potentially be a chance. Like, obviously it's unrealistic for them to have like a large scale vintage event just because the cost of entry is absurd.
Reserve list.
Reserve list Power 9 decks, like it's absolutely nuts. But on the other hand, Pauper is something that even including like 100% price spikes, most of the meta decks are still going to be like 200 at most.
And going back to what you were saying with and I lost it. Oh, wow! I just had a brain fart. I'm sorry.
Was it in regards to like the experimentation thing?
I think so, in part. See, I had it and I lost it.
All right. We can move on, but like I do think that in part this is motivated in a chance to like let these formats shine and put out the carrot there. Like, if a bunch of people are grinding Pauper to potentially get to the Pro Tour, like, that's something that from their perspective they need to find a way to monetize.
So I've got where I was going now. So it was I was reading this point where Card Hoarder was discussing the implications of this particular article and what it means for how Wizards is treating like Magic Online right now. Because obviously Arena is the hottest thing right now. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if you guys have touched Arena yet, but Arena
it's great.
Is so good. I like to think of myself these days as like a hardcore grinder, someone who actively just pushes my gameplay to an extreme. And I think especially with these Pauper Leagues happening, I'm going to find myself even more spiky. Obviously, everybody knows me for playing elves, but I foresee myself in the future playing a lot more of like Boros, Tron, things like that, So, but I mean, at some point that just wears on you and it gets tough. But when I go and play Arena, I'm just like, I'm relaxing. It doesn't matter if I win or lose. I'm here. I'm having fun, and that's what matters. So, I think I definitely think Arena is great, and I think it's the way of the future in certain respects. But like what Card Hoarder was implying was that it actually shows that they are keeping true to what they were saying before, and that they have no intention of getting rid of Magic Online anytime soon. That what it is really looking like is that they want Arena to just be its own thing. They want Arena to be a place where you can go play Standard. where you can go play limited and just have a good time. It doesn't need to be extreme, but it lets people kind of get in and maybe get a little bit more competitive. But then Magic Online is that next step up, where they you can go and play all these weird formats. And I think that's what they even say somewhere like in the article in question, that they're going to try like even stranger formats than they're used to trying. And obviously we've seen them before, with like flashback drafts where they've done like the cross-plane thing where they'll do like a event with like 6 Ravnica booster packs, 6 Dominaria themed booster packs, 6 Mirrodin packs, things like that. And obviously what this shows is that they're willing to like actually go even deeper into like the constructed formats that they're not going to be able to really push on Arena. So what it actually shows is that they're really committing even further to keeping Magic Online in for basically the long term, as far as what we can tell right now, for at least another year minimum. And obviously, if we can just read between the lines here for a minute, I mean, it's going to be longer than that. It's just going to be. It's not going away anytime soon. They're going to push Arena, and obviously they're still doing that. Like they've said that on December 6th they're coming out with another major organized play announcement, and a lot of speculation is that that's going to be like a thing about pushing Arena more as an esport. But I think they're still going to maintain Magic Online.
I think the way I've conceptualized it at this point is Arena is, and bear with me on this tedious metaphor, but Arena is Instagram and Magic Online is Photoshop. Like they both allow you to edit photos, but one is designed for ease of use, one is designed for being accessible, and the other one is designed as a workhorse tool. Like, yes, MitGo has its problems. Let's not beat around the bush. None of it. We've all played enough Magic Online to understand that like it is not a perfect world. But I think that that's where it's going to head from here on out. Like that is your big tool for I want to grind out a bunch of leagues with a deck. Like you go to Magic Online. I want to have a little bit of fun, or I'm newer to the game, go to Arena, brush up there, and then when you're feeling like that's no longer challenging, Magic Online exists. And like, sure, it looks like it's from 2004, but don't worry about it.
And when we're talking about prices on all these cards and everything, I definitely think it wouldn't surprise me if this kind of thing where it's just this is the kind of thing, because that was one of the big things that when Arena came out, a lot of people started selling out of Magic Online because they were very scared that their cards were going to devalue. And don't get me wrong, they have devalued considerably, but a lot of that's in part because of the way the treasure chests have affected prices. But I think that this announcement alone is going to bring like a lot more consumer confidence to the playing field. People are going to be more willing to hold on to their collections and what have you. So I think it's actually going to drive the economy, and actually that alone might, push prices up a little bit more.
So not to like harp on the whole like economic side of this too much, but I think another thing that's worth discussing, and I'd love to hear both your sides on this. Do you think the fact that Arena is being pushed as sort of the outlet for standard play, do you think that in the long run that's actually going to affect the cost of cards on Magic Online from standard sets, because it is much more accessible to draft on Arena, and as a result people are opening less packs on Magic Online? Like I think there were a couple of people I saw talking about this being a potential future on Twitter, but I kind of wanted to get your folks' opinion on this.
I'm going to say possible. Just because of I don't know how I feel about that, because I think regardless of the fact, you're still going to have people drafting on Magic Online, and because they like to play whatever they like to play, and then you're also going to have the fact that there's also set redemption on Magic Online. There's things that they can't really do on arena that you're able to do more on Magic Online. Cube is a good example, because Cube, you're able to, you have a full library of cards that you can just take from, pick from, and what have you. And but on Arena, they would basically need to recode every single one of those cards.
Yeah, that is a little bit rough. It's a tricky one. Like, seeing the future of this stuff is not simple or something that we can easily predict here.
I think the economics will be affected to an extent. I think people will continue to draft on Magic Online for whatever reason. Maybe because there's a more competitive element to it still. But that's actually a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of, to be honest with you. I wonder if... So it to me, it really depends how they are going to keep running Arena. Mike and I talked about this recently. Are we going to get to keep our cards when we rotate? The only example we have is Amonkhet, which was wiped when the closed beta stopped. So that's not really a good example. If people want to... Sorry, go ahead.
And I didn't even think about what you were saying, too. The competitive aspect is actually a very real thing. Because it's not just... Because there is the factor of that with... like we're talking about now with the whole Pauper Leagues and everything, and what the implications are of the specific thing. You can actually get qualifier points by drafting. And a lot of people do that. And that's the kind of thing that gets people that. The limited events also let you have, there are like almost daily preliminary Pro Tour qualifiers for like sealed of the most recent set. So I definitely think that the card availability, at least for a little while, that's not changing too much. It's going to go down a little bit as more people do move to Arena, but I don't think it's going to be significant enough to like cause a massive shift like that.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree with you. I think that it is definitely uncharted territory, which is why it's kind of fun to speculate. But I am also interested to see how it shakes out. The other thing is there's no monetary gain to be had in Arena, right? It is free, but in Moto is not free, obviously, but you do get to recoup some of the, like, if you just ever decide to stop playing Magic, you do get some of that money back. So I wonder if that will also influence people's decisions to build collections on Moto. For, I don't know. So obviously for every trash common that won't matter, but some of the cards will be worthwhile.
Well, and it's like I said, I even kind of like, I think I commented on it there that, set redemption is still going to be a thing. Far as I can tell, that's not necessarily going away anytime soon.
I think another thing to consider is also like, I think that if we see that effect of like Arena affecting the cost of standard cards on Magic Online, I imagine we're going to see it much more at higher rarities, just because like at most, like if commons from standard legal sets go from, a cent to 2 cents, that's not the end of the world. Right. But if you double the cost of like a standard mythic, that's pretty sizable.
But I'm not going to lie though. Like I'm looking at the price. I've been eyeballing the price of like standard decks and everything, because obviously I am a part of the Card Hoarder Network stream team, so as a result of that, I have a tendency to try out a lot of other decks in different formats nowadays, and that includes standard. And before, I would like rent out a like a whole standard deck, and it would cost like 200, 300 tickets off of my little loan thing. And but now I'm looking at the list, and it's like Boros Weenie right now is 113 tickets. Golgari Midrange is 136. Is It Drake's is 131. Jeskai Control is there it is, 179. So these are down significantly from where they were in the past.
Huh.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe in part because of Arena. And I don't know, but it's definitely it's a very interesting dynamic. Just when you look at that, it's like, wow, these are like way less.
Delver costs more than some of these decks.
The other thing too that I'm thinking of is like also like think about the fact that like Dominaria was a tremendously open set on Magic Online.
That's true.
When I say tremendously, I mean it doesn't even come close to what, because Dominaria is just generally considered the new Innistrad or the new Rise of the Eldrazi. It's like one of the best draft formats of all time. And it was just, people just kept drafting it and drafting it and drafting it and just could not get enough of it. I'm guilty of that myself. I could not stop drafting Dominaria for a very long time.
It's a really good format. Like that was the thing. Like no one's gonna shame you here. Like you're not like admitting to like, oh yeah, no, I really really enjoyed like triple Amonkhet.
Yeah,
I will shame you for that. But I wonder if part of that is the fact that like now that Arena provides another outlet for players who play Standard, I'm wondering if this is a case of the supply is decreasing, but not as swiftly as the demand.
The other way, Magic, you mean, right? You mean the demand is decreasing, but not faster than the supply?
No. I think the demand is decreasing faster than the supply, resulting in lower prices.
Oh, sorry. We mean the same thing. I just didn't understand it the first time. Sorry.
Yeah, like I've got to wonder if it's kind of that sort of effect where like it's not just supply is going down, demand is staying static. They're both going down. One's just going down quicker.
Here's something I kind of wanted to piggyback off earlier before we get too far along too. I don't know if they're going to let you keep your cards on Arena. There's some speculation about like an Arena type Modern, but if you want to keep playing older formats, you have to play Moto, and so there will be Standard sets opened on Moto because think of like Search for Iskanta. Like
that's true.
People are Teferi. Like, people still need those cards.
That's true. I'm not saying it's going to dry up completely. I just think that we could see a dip. All right. So do we want to actually like crack into some of the specifics of this article? Because I've got to admit, I skimmed through it and there's a lot of graphics in it, like diagrams. And frankly, I'm feeling a little bit like I'm back in like high school level biology with like weird diagrams of evolution.
Right. So let me actually give me just a quick second. And where I mentioned before the take from Card Hoarder and everything, I can actually pull up like basically a TLDR of the whole article. So give me just one quick second. I probably should have had this up beforehand. Okay, here's a summary that I have from user Waffle Sandwiches on Reddit here. And it says, here's a quick summary for people who are like me and don't know Magic Online very well. There's now a third way to qualify for the Magic Online Championship Series, aka MOCS, through format-specific tournaments. By going 5-0 in a competitive constructed event, you earn 5 format points specific to that format. Modern, Legacy, Vintage, or Pauper now. Going 4-1 gets you 2 of those points. Note that you still get the general qualifier points and MOCS leadership points as well, but format points are easier to earn than normal qualifying points. Once a week, there is a format challenge event. Obviously, we already see that now. Winning this event earns you 35 format points, which is the target number you need to move on. But they cost almost double the tickets to enter that specific event, which is 25 tickets compared to the 12 tickets that it costs to enter a competitive league. This is the type of event to attract people who aren't grinding in the queue, and want to qualify for the format qualifier quickly. Once every 3 months, you pay 35 format points to enter the format qualifier. This is a Swiss tournament, and top 8 gets qualifiers to the format championship. At the end of the year, there is a format championship with 32 players from the qualifiers. The winner gets an invite into the MOCS, which is the actual Magic Online Championship itself. And I don't know the exact structure of that, but I think it's like a 16-man tournament. And the winner of it gets a Pro Tour invite. So you can literally play Pauper all the way from these competitive leagues or these challenges straight up into the Pro Tour.
Which is absurd.
I also want to point out that you now have new avatars, which if you're vain like me, means something.
Yeah,
you do love your flashy trinkets.
It's definitely been a thing where I've like, one of the appeals that made me really want to try like standard or modern for a little bit was to do things like when Dominaria had old lady Jaya as the avatar, for Mythic, and so like you had to get a bunch. It's like, man, like I feel like I may be able to get there with Pauper. Like I've done that level of like trophies before, but I've never done that for competitive, just because the barrier to entry was so rough for competitive. Like for me to try getting into Legacy, it's hope that I can get there enough to practice, and hope that I can earn enough entries from the friendly leagues and Pauper. And same with like modern and standard, I'm basically having to relearn a whole new format again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's unlikely, like in the great scheme of things, it's a very difficult path to take, but the fact that it's there now is kind of neat.
Yeah, and like I think it's easier than going to the physical tournaments, but yeah, Magic's a very hard game to do well in.
Yeah.
Depending on your region as well. I know that I'm gonna blank on his name. The guy who
Li
Shiqian during his Hall of Fame induction talked about how difficult it is for players specifically in the APAC region to get to enough tournaments to qualify for Pro Tours.
And for the record, because I also know that my friend Jessica Estefan, who is as she's known as that woman that won the Grand Prix, she because she lives in Australia, as she basically referred to, and Li Tian basically said but didn't say it outright. This doesn't include Japan. A lot of people think APAC includes Japan, and I guess on a technical level it does, but there's a very strong differentiation between the amount of events that like Japan gets versus the entire rest of the overall APAC region.
Yeah, I've definitely seen like people from Australia being like, oh, we get one GP here a year if we're lucky, and that's about it. And that is really rough because like in the past year I've managed to go to 2 GPs on public transit. Like I'm sure like if I wanted to, I could have gone to a bunch of others in my region relatively easily. If you have to get on a plane and go to another country physically to participate in a second GP in a year, that is a huge difference. Like me hopping on a bus or a train is way, way different in terms of scale.
Like,
so
obviously like driving up to Atlanta just a few weeks ago, that's one thing, but you can't do that from Australia over to Hong Kong like they were doing. What are you going to do? Drive through the ocean?
Yeah. So seeing this is good for regions like that where you do have this difficulty of like just getting to events, let alone winning them. So this is nice that it provides an opportunity for players in those regions to sort of have better access to these large scale events. And I'm generally excited about this. I think it's good on the whole.
It definitely is.
So we've kind of wandered from Pauper, but let's refocus a little bit. What do you expect is going to change with the advent of the competitive leagues? And I want an answer more specific than people will stop playing so many decks that I think are bad.
Well, I'd like to take my first crack at that. I think the format will have a lot more scrutiny than it has in the past. You mentioned this earlier. It wouldn't surprise me if there were some bannings after a couple of months. I don't know if we need them, but I'm also not out there trying to break the format every day.
Right.
So I'm very interested to see what teams of competitive players will do, how that will change the landscape. And it wouldn't surprise me if some stuff got banned as a result.
So my point earlier, because I know you said you didn't want to really get this kind of answer specifically of, the lower tier decks getting kind of pushed out and everything. I'm not saying that that's necessarily going to happen, but I think here's kind of the trajectory that I'm kind of foreseeing a little bit. I think the first week or two is going to be a lot of people, like I said, trying things out. They're going to just take the same decks that they run in friendly leagues, and they're going to take them into competitive leagues and see how they do. So first couple weeks, it's going to be a bit closer to just what we see in friendly leagues. What you're going to see, though, is really quickly, you're going to see a lot of the players who maybe don't have the best win percentage, be it because of their deck type in choice or just because of their own play skill, not trying to harp on anybody in that regard. But that's definitely going to have an impact, and it's going to push some of the decks out of the format. Couple that with the fact that when people see competitive league and they see spikier attitudes, they're going to lean a little bit more in on the decks that are like the top tier decks. So I think for the first couple of weeks, you're going to see a much harder push on Delver decks, Tron, and Boros specifically. And then I think things will start to kind of readjust accordingly.
Yeah, so I think with more on the line, people are going to take it a little bit more seriously. And I expect that, the things that are going to get hit, obviously the worst, like I imagine like the sort of tier 3 quote unquote lists that you just look at and you're like, what on earth is this? Those are likely, I feel, are just going to dry up almost entirely. But then I also think like we're going to see stuff like White Black Pestilence either have to adapt to a very razor honed metagame or just be forced out. I think that we've talked about this before, there's a pretty wide swath of like tier 2 decks that people really enjoy playing and put up 5-0s because people really enjoy playing them. I think with this new payout system, you're no longer incentivized to like just go 3-2. Like 3-2 is break even. That's
right.
it.
And
so
it's still the same payout for the competitive leagues at 3-2 as the friendly leagues. You still do get your entry back, and you also do get one treasure chest. However, anything below that gets nothing. If you go 2-3, you get nothing. You don't, with the friendly leagues, you obviously get half of your entry back currently in the form of play points. You get nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, whereas with, but on the opposite side of that, for going 4-1, you also get, you actually get, instead of 120 play points, which is your entry back, you get 100. I believe you get 180 play points. So you get your entry and a half of another entry in as well. You also get a full 8 treasure chests as opposed to the 4 that you would get currently. Plus, you also get, I believe, obviously they said you get 2 format points and 1 MOCS qualifier point as well. And then the 5-0 gets basically the same thing, but instead the treasure chests, you get 16 as opposed to 8. And you also get, obviously, more format points, and you get 3 qualifier points for the Mox series as opposed to just the 1. So there's definitely a big jump in the prizes, but there is definitely a cost. I mean, like I said before, I've tried modern competitive leagues. I've tried legacy competitive leagues. They are very difficult, and even more so if you don't know the format.
Yeah, I think and that kind of touches on something. I like the fact now that there's sort of a stratification similar to how, if you're looking for a pickup game, there's, the just for fun, the getting started, and the tournament practice rooms. Like we now kind of have that tiered level of skill thing going on with actual leagues, which is nice. So someone can, I've been jamming games with this in tournament practice. I'm going to go into a friendly league. Okay, I did fine in a friendly league. I'm going to take this and go into a competitive league. Ooh, didn't quite work out there. Let's go back to the drawing board. I like the fact that you can do that.
And even if you let's say they do get rid of friendly leagues, there's always going to be something happening. Gatherling.com runs regular weekly Pauper events. They're player run, but they pay out in some number of like credits for bots that you can use on cards. And if it really comes down to it, you can sell those cards individually that you buy from that bot for actual just tournament entries, and you can use those entries to buy into another league and try your hand at things again.
Yeah. So I guess with regards to the metagame, the basic takeaway here I think people should have is you're going to have to try a lot harder with these more fringe strategies. Like I think we're going to see like, and I don't think I saw anything yet about the reporting. I don't know if anyone else saw anything about that.
So, if I can take a stab at this because I have I've paid enough attention to how this works in other formats that I can guess at how this is going to work.
Is it still going to be the like 10 cards difference thing?
Yes. However, it's going to get tighter. We're going to see less of these fringe decks popping up, and there's a reason for that. Obviously, as you said, we're not going to see them nearly as much in the competitive leagues because it's going to be that much tougher. To your skill, the skill level, is going to have a very higher floor. What that means is you're going to see a lot less of those fringe decks because what's going to happen is they are not going to record the friendly leagues anymore. When they do it with standard and modern, they do not track the friendly leagues. They only track the competitive ones.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that. Mm-hmm. Like I'm very much not opposed to like us getting more information about the more competitive
and one other thing that is worth touching on here, kind of just as an off thing while we're just going at this a little bit. I think one thing that we've been seeing, and I think others have noted, the last few weeks with the Pauper challenges have been very low. It's been low turnout pretty consistently for the last couple. And while for like the last, year roughly, we've had enough people consistently where the round count was always 7 rounds. Always 7 rounds. Mm-hmm. But I guess for the last 3 weeks, we've had less than 64 players show up. So it's been 6-round events pretty consistently. And what I think, based on this whole thing, where they're saying like, hey, if you win one of these, you automatically qualify for the regular monthly playoff event for the format. I think you're going to see a higher turnout. And I think if anywhere, as we've seen in the past, the jank, those more tier 3 kind of decks or whatever, definitely stand more of a chance in those challenges. They're not always the best, but we've seen, very rogue decks make really strong showings out of the blue in these challenges. So it's definitely still possible that we'll still see some oddballs here and there.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to completely snuff it out.
Right, just... and I think as well that as we saw mentioned a little bit in the our Discord that we're a part of and help run, there was some concern about how the bannings might affect the format, and that might spiral into a domino effect. But then others mentioned that we have that kind of thing happen with Modern. And that there's always new stuff coming out for Modern, little bit by little bit, but it reshapes the format over time. And so, like, Modern now looks completely different from how Modern looked a year ago. Affinity, the original Affinity, with just your Ravagers, your Vault Scourges, and Signal Pests,
it's dead.
Hopefully, and it's basically dead. It can steal wins here and there, but this was like the top dog of the format for a very long time,
over a decade,
100,
maybe not that
long. And it's been there forever now, and it's just right now it is garbage. And so so I think even if we do see some major shakeups, I think the format will find itself. Obviously, with Guilds of Ravnica, we saw some great new cards hit the format. Not all of them are being played just yet, but we definitely saw a lot of really cool cards. Ultimate Masters is going to provide us with some new spice, to my understanding, and that's to say nothing about. We've got 2 more Ravnica style sets ahead of us, and then we've got who knows what after that.
Yeah, we're heading into what I feel like impulse, like the gut feeling I get is like this is good for the format in the long run, even if people have an initial revulsion to it. So I'm going to be interested to see how this shakes out. And interestingly, you talked about like the numbers being down. I don't know if that's a seasonal thing or something, because I've noticed on the weekends I go play Commander with some friends over at a game shop, and then there's Modern, and that's when they kick out all the Commander players. The last like 3 weeks or so, their Modern events haven't been firing, and it's not like a bunch of people left. Like obviously Boston is a college town, so at first I was like, oh, it must be a vacation, and then I'm like, no, it's the beginning of November.
And I think
like, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think, that might have, now you mention it, like I do remember somewhat, this time last year, when I actually won one of those challenges myself. Haven't really gotten anywhere close to that since. Made like 1 or 2 other top 8s, I think. But, the last time I won one of those was a 6-player event. So, or I'm sorry, not 6-player, 6-round event because of low player turnout.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think it's one of those weird things where like you have those seasonal shifts. Like summer is really good for like high player density because people are off school, people are, taking vacation time. It's the time of year where people go out and do things for fun.
And you see that a bit more even in winter too. Winter people go out of town. They'll go more south and just do things for fun. You'll see people making other trips, in like the springtime, as again, like the things kind of shift. But in the fall, like you said, everybody's kind of getting back into the groove of school again and things like that. So
yeah, I'm not 100% sure if it's waning interest or if it's like an outside factor that we can't directly identify. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the metagame. So Kendra, I feel like we've got you here, and a segment of our fan base is not appreciative of the trash talking I do to elves. Do you think, because you are, for better or worse, the herald of this deck, do you think that elves is going to get better or worse with these competitive leagues, and what we would potentially expect from the metagame in terms of gush decks probably coming to a slightly higher forefront, seeing a bit of the sort of fringer, more chaff kind of decks going away? Do you think that this helps or hinders elves?
I don't know. I think it's a bit of a mix. Depends on how people play things and how things shape out. Again, I've said this for a long time. I think elves is a lot stronger than people give it credit for. But where you can maybe like 5-0 a lot with something like Delver or Boros, that doesn't really have or Tron, that doesn't really have too many, just bad matchups that it'll run into on a regular basis. Elves has a couple of them, and they are usually along the lines of something like Burn. And it's kind of like I mentioned earlier, Burn right now is very prevalent in leagues because it's affordable. It's not always the best, but when it comes to battling against something like elves, Burn usually wins. It usually wins that race. So I think because I think we'll start to see a little bit of a downturn in like the popularity of decks like Burn, Mono Black Control, I think we'll start to see an even further dip. Obviously, it's already a bit of a tier 2 deck that's just kind of on the medium side of things right now. But people still play it and jam it because they could do well against a couple of specific kinds of decks. And I don't think it's going to fare quite as well in the competitive leagues. So when you're taking out basically 2 of Elves' worst matchups, they're still going to show up, but they're going to show up in lower quantities. I think it's going to give a little bit more rise to the deck as an archetype in the format. It has a good Tron matchup, has a good Boros matchup to surprise of a lot of people. It completely shreds Mono Blue Delver, and obviously just destroys like Stompy. Blue Red Delver, it's a bit of a toss-up depending on how you look at it. I'd also say it also depends on the skill level of the Delver player. But I definitely think it feels like Elves has a lot more potential to be better positioned. But I think it also depends on the amount of hate that we see. Like the amount of electricities that are being thrown around everywhere. If people are running Croc Clan Shaman, things like that. If it basically comes down to how much of the hate are we going to see, and how much is the Elves players prepared for that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonably in-depth assessment. And you actually talked about a deck which we've kind of noticed has been going away a little bit. Do you think Stompy maybe gets to eke into the format
Absolutely.
again?
Reason being there, Delver. It just Stompy, even against blue-red Delver, Stompy just shreds Delver. And I think because we're going to see a massive uptick in Delver lists with this, let's make no mistake, that's going to happen. I think, and we're also probably going to see a bit of a shying away from the black decks a little bit more. I think Stompy definitely stands a chance at coming back pretty significantly here. Even if it's not the most successful, it's also that deck that people can just take in jam leagues over and over and over really quick.
All right. So yeah, that's a little bit of an insight into where we think things are going to be headed. So I think the thing I'm the most curious and know the least about, I'm curious to see where Familiars winds up in this new format, because we did a show about a month ago at this point talking about the claim that Familiars might be the tier 0 of our format, and I'm curious to see if that bears out once we move over to the competitive leagues. I'm curious to see where that deck winds up.
Dirtle forever.
Because, yeah.
It's definitely going to be interesting, because what you're going to see as well is you're definitely going to see with competitive leagues, you're going to see a lot more of the players who are very competent with Magic Online. You're occasionally going to see the stragglers come in who think, that they can just do it, but then they realize that they don't know how Magic Online really functions. Like when I know I've seen a lot of streamers, for example, miss they don't use auto yields correctly, or they don't stack triggers correctly. And because they don't do that, they actually miss out on 5 minutes of their clock, which is massive on Magic Online.
Yeah, it's a quarter, right?
No,
a
fifth.
Oh, a fifth. That's what I meant. You have 25 minutes.
We got there. All right. So I guess, does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? We're pulling up on about an hour or so here, and probably start wrapping the show up. But is there anything else that people want to kind of get out there as a takeaway for this episode?
So my big thing, I think this is going to be very good for the format. I think this is definitely a step in the right direction for Pauper as a format. I think it's going to help the format grow in its own respect. I think it's also, like others have suggested, and I know I kind of brought this up earlier a little bit, it definitely leads to the fact that it may be a good signifier that they're gearing up to maybe push something a little bit more in paper, which is something that a lot of us want to see more. As I mentioned before in the pre-show, I've played other events and it doesn't, give me as much as I want. It doesn't give any Planeswalker points to get buys for GPs, which, let me emphasize too, if Wizards does go full on with this, and we do see a Pauper Grand Prix or a Star City Open or something, it's hard to, get into that, because you're not going to have the buys someone who plays standard or modern all the time is going to have. So it's definitely a big positive if we go in that direction. So I think that while a lot of people are hesitant about this, I think it lends definitely to helping out the format growth down the line here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. All right. Adrian, you got anything for us on the way out, or are we ready to shut down the show for the night?
Let's turn it off. Shut it down.
I do want to thank Kendra for coming on at such short notice, but yeah, always great to have you on here.
I want to do this as much as you guys. So, so I guess I'll just take a quick moment and just say that, first off, it's been a pleasure joining you guys on here again. And that if you guys want to find any of my content specifically, I write for coolstuffinc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. And I have a new article up every Wednesday. There may be a second one sometime later this week or very early next week, depending on how the schedule lines up regarding a lot of this as we've discussed it today. I have old content with Hipsters of the Coast, good old articles on there. You can find me on Twitter at TheMaverickGirl. I have the Maverick Girl on like Magic Online or whatever, but cannot use that on Twitter. So the Maverick Girl on Twitch as well for streaming.
All right. Thank you very much for getting that plug in there. All right. Adrian?
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you as part of our patrons, especially MRH Blue. Please consider supporting us just like them if you like the show. Check this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. We actually did get a few emails, but this news was pretty important. So thanks for emailing it in. We'll get around to it hopefully next week. Special thanks to my LGS Pat's Games and Mike's LGS JP Comics, and of course, L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. For next week, this is Adrian and Mike with special guest Kendra signing off of Color Commentary.
Have a great night.